Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. He's already got one stunning upset victory on his resume, and he's looking for another. Scott Brown beat the Kennedy dynasty in Massachusetts. Now he's up against the Sununu dynasty here in New Hampshire. Senator Brown is our guest this morning on Close-Up. Thanks for being here, Senator.
It's good to see you again.
So, Senator, a lot of New Hampshire families right now are paying around $100 to fill a tank of gas in New Hampshire. And they voted for affordability in 2024. They wanted lower gas prices. They wanted no foreign wars, and they got the opposite. What do you tell them?
Well, first of all, I'm one of them. I just put $80 in the truck yesterday. And prior to that, I was paying probably $35, $40. So it's real, obviously. And when President Trump got in office, gas prices were very high. This time, I looked it up, this time in the Biden administration, actually gas was $5 to $5.16. Right now, it's $4.30 to $4.45. So it's still lower than the previous administration. So you say, why is that? Well, our entire delegation didn't do anything back then. And now Chris Pappas is filing bills. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, he's not. The bills aren't going anywhere. And I certainly understand that situation. And as I travel around the state, here's basically the dichotomy, the thing that people are wrestling with. They're saying, yes, we're paying more temporarily. It's gone up incrementally, as you said. But we also have the opportunity once and for all to neutralize Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And they say, do we do that now, or do we wait 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And I think that's so critical, because that's the big bully in the region, exporting terrorism around the region and the world, doing everything they can to basically, when they say death to America, death to Israel, well, New Hampshire's in America. So they're saying death to New Hampshire, too. So I'm hopeful. I'm encouraged by what we're seeing in terms of the negotiations and trying to pull everything and put it in a nice package. And I'm hopeful that people will be a little bit more patient. But the efforts by Chris Pappas, I see every day there's a new tweet about, I'm doing this. What did he do for the last years? His regulations and over-regulations on our energy folks and the Green New Deal and all these other things have contributed to this mess. And the president's kind of unwinding it.
You can take the long view. The short view, though, is that this conflict is driving up those prices.
Absolutely.
How much tolerance, though, should the voters have if this goes on and there is no resolution?
Yeah, listen, I don't disagree with you at all, and that's the question. And it's up to each individual family. Obviously, for people who are on a fixed budget, it's hurting. And I want to make sure that I can get in there, if elected, to go in there and not make sure those things don't happen again. And I have already made it public. Listen, I support what the president's doing right now, because 47 years, every president's wanted to do something, and he's finally doing it. But if we're going to put 50,000 troops on the ground, I think we need a declaration of war. That's the difference between me and John. And Chris Pappas, he doesn't want to do anything. He wants to continue to observe and see what happens, and that's not the answer at all.
Ground troops, though, you mentioned that. Do you think that's a legitimate option, something the American people would want?
Well, listen, they're over there. They're waiting, and I hope not. And for me, I've drawn a line in the sand. I think you need to get a declaration of war.
Given that Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz, essentially, and we've got this blockade on the blockade, do you think the way the war has been prosecuted at this point has been strategically smart?
Well, I disagree with you. I don't think they control the strait at all. I mean, we just saw what happened, I think yesterday or early this morning. We had, they attacked 3 of our destroyers, and they were neutralized immediately. We don't want to be stupid and then go through willy-nilly and not have a plan. I think the president, the fact that the Iran foreign ministers in China is hurting more than we are, for sure. And they need that oil, not only obviously from what we see, what's happening, in many different countries. They're hurting, and so are other countries. Yeah, I think strategically we control the strait, and we will have the opportunity to make sure that this thing goes through logically and thoughtfully. And I think time's on our side. Their economy's, what is it, $500 million a day that they're losing, and the dysfunction of the people who are the military folks want to keep going, and the political folks are saying, okay, no mas, we want to solve this problem. So there's complete dysfunction in Iran, and I think it's appropriate.
And yet some of the American allies in the region, too, have reportedly asked the administration to scale back, right? I mean, there was that reporting that said that President Trump wanted more gung-ho action there, and some of the allies from Saudi and others were saying, hey, you're not going to use our airspace for this. So it's delicate how this has to operate.
Of course.
But do you want an American military presence like the one that's there? Obviously, we're in the Middle East. But do you want this to continue for a long time? Because
No,
if America's going to control the Strait of Hormuz, that seems like it's a permanent.
Of course I don't. I believe our allies, quite frankly, need to step up, and they haven't. I'm glad that I guess the French finally sent a ship. Did they send the croissants as well? I mean, we can't do this alone. And the fact that this is way more important to people in that part of the world than it is for us. But to think that Iran is going to have a toll booth, that gives a green light to China and the South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific. Those are the things I push back against as an ambassador. That's why we had that the ability to transverse through all oceans, international waters, without being stopped. And this is a very important situation worldwide.
Chris Pappas has said he's now opposing certain arms sales to Israel, and it was the war in Iran that changed his mind. Do you think that the United States needs to reevaluate its relationship with Israel at all based on how Israel has operated, in particular in regards to this Iran situation?
Well, first of all, Chris Pappas has taken over $500,000 from AIPAC, which is the big lobbyist for Israel and Jewish interests. So for him to say that all of a sudden he's woke and he's found a new mission, I think is laughable. He has no military experience. He has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to these issues. It's every person we deal with, every conflict we have, we're always evaluating our relationships. But to do so in the middle of a conflict that, quite frankly, I think is a good thing for the area, to get rid of that bully. They're still providing funds for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So once again, Chris Pappas wants to, just evaluate it and look at it. He's not qualified in that regard, and it shows.
If you're back in the Senate in 2027, what's your plan to get consumers their money back from the tariffs that were declared unconstitutional?
Well, I think they're going to, there's certain parts that they said, and I think it's going to continue to go through the courts. And if they make that decision, we have to do it. Then we have to come up with a plan, obviously. But it's too far in the future right now for me. I'm not there, and I want to make sure I have all the information, obviously.
But should the money go back to the businesses, or should it go back to the people who paid?
Once again, that's going to be a question du jour that I am not qualified at this point to discuss, because I haven't, seen the inner workings. I read everything. I don't just willy-nilly say, oh, I'm going to do this and do that. I need to make sure I understand the issue and read the bills, see how they affect our state, our country, debt and deficit, and vote. And I don't have that information right now.
There are some who predict that we're about to see major economic dislocation due to artificial intelligence, that entire sections of the labor market could just disappear and be replaced by AI, and that it's not going to be the same that it was in past eras when you saw, horse and buggy to combustion engine and certain jobs were replaced by the others. The argument here is that the jobs will just disappear. If that's the case, what, if anything, do you think the federal government should do about that?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. I get that asked often, and I know John Sununu basically wants to put a light touch on AI because he supports the lobbyists that support him on those things. They pay the bills. Whenever I think of AI, I think of Terminator 1 through 20, and I have serious concerns about, is there a mechanism to stop what they're doing in the event it moves forward and it's uncontrollable? I believe that the federal government needs to play a role, absolutely, because to have 50 different fiefdoms in states doing things, I think is dysfunctional, and it'll get a tactical advantage to China, which, they're right on our heels. We lead the world right now in this issue, and I believe if we do it responsibly, we will lead the world again. We're seeing it in our military being used. I think there's some great benefits to it, but also building all those energy centers in AI facilities, our laborers, our electricians, plumbers, there's a tremendous amount of work right now, and I want to make sure that that aging workforce has the ability to bring in younger people, so starting at our community colleges, our trade schools, and the whole 9 yards to create jobs in that respect.
What do you think, though, when the industry says you really regulate us and China does win on AI?
Well, there is a certain amount of regulation already. The president started the AI, conglomerate, bringing those people in to get the best of the best to figure it out, and I look forward to hopefully being part of that solution.
Moving to some more domestic issues right now, do you have confidence in Kash Patel as the head of the FBI?
Well, I've never met him. I see that he's doing some wonderful things in terms of dealing with a lot of the issues we're facing right now. That's really up to the president. He doesn't work for me. He works for the president, and the president has shown that he is willing to get rid of people and promote others, and that's pretty normal in an administration.
Was it a good look, though? I mean, at the Olympics, pounding beers in the locker room. Is that who you want to lead?
Well, listen, I'd rather have someone pounding beers than hammering our athletes like others did, or putting men and boys and women and girls sports like Chris Pappas does. So I was excited that they won. I think I cracked a beer as well, so I'm guilty.
Okay. All right. Should taxpayers be picking up the tab for the White House ballroom?
After we saw what happened, I think it's always appropriate to enhance our security. If it keeps the president's moving forward safer, I think you can do a public-private partnership. I think it's important to make sure we enhance it, because I've been to that facility where he almost got killed and where Reagan got shot. It's outdated. It's not secure. We need something that's safe and secure. And if it benefits every president and every sitting elected official and other important people when they're doing these events, I think it makes sense.
Hundreds of millions of dollars, though, at this time. Is that the right thing to do?
Well, once again, there's been many offers of private, public-private partnerships and private donations. I'd explore that first and make sure that we can do it without the taxpayers, burdening.
I'm interested if you think it makes sense to attack Chris Pappas over any potential association, whether or not he is going to support Graham Platner over in Maine, the presumptive Senate nominee.
Yeah, of course it is. It's a yes or no.
The point being, that's a candidate over there who's said and done some things that might offend people, and yet his support has kind of stayed the same. Seems a little bit like the Trump situation with Republicans, and they don't like having to answer for everything he does. So why should Pappas answer?
Well, it's pretty easy, because it is the next state over. It's a yes or no question. Do you support him or not? Not, oh, I'm running here in New Hampshire. Well, no kidding. We all know you're running. You've been running for 7, 8 years. It's very easy. You have a guy basically who has a Nazi tattoo, or had. He has radical thoughts and ideas, but that's the new Democratic Party. I mean, to think that the governor has basically withdrew, and now Susan Collins, who's one of the hardest working elected officials I've ever met, I think she has like 15,000 straight votes. She has the record of being the most consistent voter. You may not agree with her on everything, but she's not going to basically jeopardize a lot of the things that we believe in.
All right, Senator Brown, thanks for doing Close-Up again. We'll see you again one more time before that primary.
Just one? Come on.
Well, a lot of other candidates.
Well, I just want to tell you, we are having a debate on June 24th in the Seacoast, and I hope people come to it. And we're having an open town hall coming up in Dover soon, so go to scottbrown.com.
All right, we'll be there for it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.